Hi everyone! Yesterday night I had a power failure at my place, so I couldn't record the video because I had no internet. So now I'm doing it this morning. So we are now at Module 2. In Module 1, we were going back on the IB philosophy because sometimes when we plan, we forget about the main idea for which the program exists, which was the mission statement, which was trying to get students to be engaged citizens, so to be internationally minded. And also there was a few reading among which we had what is an IB education that reminded us, apart from the fact of being internationally minded, of having to develop the attributes of the IB learner profile, which came back in Learning Engagement 4. But there was also the approaches to teaching, to which we'll come back later when we are going to do the action, the learning process in the action section of the unit plan. So we'll do that in Module 4. So that's going to be really important that within the learning process, we see all approaches to teaching like appearing, that you have considered them and that you're using them in your class, because the idea is not only to fill up papers, it's mainly to think about these things while planning and to to be able to use these approaches in class. So that was Module 1. And also, of course, there was the standards and practices that you have been able to read, the standard 04 about the learning process. So we'll come back to it later. I'm going to read everything that you've posted and try to answer as many questions as I can. So in Module 2, many of you have started already, so that's great. In Learning Engagement 1, the idea is really to try to find a resource, but everything is linked. So if you look at the modules, some people prefer thinking about a task, but we will try to make it as authentic as possible, so it might be modified later on. But you think about an assessment, something that you want to do an IB assessment, either evaluating criterion A, B, C, or D, or more than one. So we'll come back to these criteria in Module 3. But when we think about the task that we want our students to do, keeping in mind to try to make it as authentic as possible, then there will be a context to the task, to the summative task, but that context will be seen beforehand. We will not come up with the global context in the summative task without having done some activities using the same context before. So that's the main idea. So in Module 2, we try to set up the context of what we're teaching. So basically what we do is that when we take a subject, let's say I would talk about geometry, then I would try to think about which task I could ask, and then which global context exploration that I want to use. And that global context exploration will be there throughout the unit. Of course, we can do some activities which relates to other global context explorations along the way, but there is going to be one main global context that we will choose that will be there all along. But when we try to introduce things that are really authentic, we generally need some resources, some things which relate to the real world. So the first learning engagement activity is to try to find a resource about the context that you want to use. So basically, you can navigate either the Global Oneness site and try to find any resource that you want. What I modified is that instead of all using the same resource, I'm asking you to try to find a resource which can inspire you or that you could use in your class perhaps, but sometimes it's just a resource in which there are data that we are going to use, present to the students. So there are many ways these resources can be used, and I'm sure you already have browsed for resources before. So here we just want to share to each other relevant resources that might be interesting to use in our planning. So first, provide the link. I remind you that when you want to provide the link, well, I'll go to in my post, okay, as usual. When you do the reply, you use the advance button, and it's easier if you use here. So you put the link within here, and you can click on open in a new window. So that way, when we click on it, it opens up a new window, and I can see the resources that you've shared. And then think about global issues. Here is really like things that you might explore with that resource. And then you can try to comment on one of the other participants' resource. Learning Engagement 2 is not here. It is like included in Learning Engagement 3. Basically, when we click on it and you see that there are many things, is that we have to choose concepts which are relevant to our unit, then a global context exploration. So that's what we want to do. So in the mathematics guide, which is when you click on my post, I have put the latest version. You have the concepts. I will go here. I will share that to you soon. I have made up my own. Whoa, that's not what I wanted to do. Is here. Click here. I have developed my own like unit planner, so that way I have provided the resources. I'll share it to you later. So we have there are 16 key concepts. You can choose any concept you want. Among these concepts, we could even think of other ones. These are only screenshots of pages from the mathematics guide. So we have 3 concepts that we must use somewhere along the way within the 5 years of the MYP. So basically we do this much more often, but still there's form, logic, and relationship, which are the main concepts related to mathematics that we will use. And then you have the related concepts, and this is like at the end of the guide, and you have the description of what it might mean. So we use these, any of these. Actually, there are 12 related concepts, and once again along the way, all related concepts have to be like used at least one in one unit from MYP 1 to 5. So within 1 year you will not use all related concepts, but if I look at the mathematics overview that you will develop among your school, then I would be able to find all 3 key concepts and all 12 related concepts. And what you'll see with the concepts, and we'll get to that also, is that these are words that will be like linked together within the unit, which leads to conceptual understanding. The idea here is like these are things that we want the students to develop strategies, tools that they will be able to transfer in other subjects, other topics, along the way. A little bit like the approaches to learning. But when we look at only one, it doesn't make sense. But we can combine these concepts, and you'll see that when we combine, and there are many possible combination things that we can combine, what you see is that we can use perhaps simplification and equivalence in algebra, for instance, to be able to solve equation. So simplification and equivalence allows us to find unknown quantities, perhaps, and that would be a conceptual understanding. But we can do that in many topics in mathematics. So you'll see that most of the time when we combine these, it becomes things that the students have to be able to do. So we can use models to generalize patterns, for instance. So there are many conceptual understanding that you might develop only using these concepts. So that's the first thing that we want to do. So we want to try to think about what we'll be able to do in the summative task and to choose the concepts that goes with it. Then you have to choose a global context exploration. We have that as well. When we talk about the global context exploration, is in the guide From Principle into Practice. And these are only the pages like starting at page 58. So we have the 6 global contexts. And then on the right column, we have global context exploration, and it is described in the module notes. So you can use part of it. For instance, I'll show you an example where I chose human impact on the environment, and I chose only consumption here. So you can select like only part of each dot, and you can combine more than one. I will never state globalization and sustainability in my statement of inquiry. I will only use these. This is the description in the middle, so we use the exploration on the right. We could, once again, add more, but basically when I ask my teachers to build a unit that I will send to the IB, I ask them to try to choose like among these, because to show that we understand what is meant. So it covers about anything, okay? So you have the key concept, the related concept, the global context exploration related to the unit, and then we will build the statement of inquiry. I didn't have my example on the right page, so I stopped the video. So here I have an example that I built just to show you what is meant. A unit plan is about 20 hours. That includes all the teaching before getting to the summative task. If I had chosen like the key concept, relationship, and related concepts, quantity and representation, and the global context, as I've said just before, I chose consumption and human impact on the environment, then I sometimes prefer to, anyway, if I relate only the concepts, what I've done is that, and there are many possibilities. Normally I brainstorm and I find many ideas, and then I get to some point where I say, well, that's really what my students have to be able to do. So here I can say relationships between quantities can be represented, which is true, and of course we will ask ourselves, how can we do that? Okay, and that's going to be the thing that is going to be able to be transferred from one topic to the next. The statement of inquiry. Representing the relationship between quantities allows to evaluate the human impact of consumption on the environment. So here I'm talking about the human impact on the environment, but basically of consumption on the environment. And I will represent the relationships between the quantities to be able to make an assessment of something, to evaluate at which point we have an impact. So that's what it meant. So basically, the learning engagement activity number 2 and 3 are these boxes. I hope it clarifies things. Then the rest is really actually nice. It's pretty easy. Once we have that in mind, our unit in mind, then we can think about what could the students do, not only to be sensitized, for instance, here on the human impact of consumption on the environment, but what could the students do in order to make the world a better place, if I may say. So there are 4 types of action that are considered for service. So these are here that might help you think about ideas, and normally it's one thing which is really, really interesting. And along the way, they will, like the approaches to learning, they will develop one of these things. So there are 7 objective learning outcomes that we want while doing the action. So you just say ideas of actions that the students could do, and then associate it with relevant learning outcomes. So this is for this activity. And then in the last one, I have 12 seconds. Just choose another subject group and say how you could like do an interdisciplinary unit about your subject. Thank you.